Kimberly, you have been so great.
Well,
This has been a challenge. Okay.
here we go. Here we go. Hold on.
Okay. Here we
Yay.
go.
Okay.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So is it okay to start now?
Yes, please. Thanks, Nancy.
Oh, hello. Thank you so much for having me. Okay, we're going to get right into today's webinar, Fostering Resilience and Growth for Lawyers in a COVID-19 World. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself later, but I want to get to the heart of the content because these are some tough times. So with that, Kimberly.
Oh.
And you'll have to forgive me because we were not able to figure out how I could use presenter notes. So I do have some notes I'm going to be looking at. So, you know, times are really, really, really stressful for all of us right now, right? Doesn't it feel as though the world is closed, is shut down? Everybody's in quarantine and everyone is struggling to adapt to the rapidly changing landscape brought about by COVID-19. Okay, next slide. So our hands are raw from all the bleach and the abrasive products we're using multiple times a day, right? I can barely keep mine moisturized. Many of us are afraid to venture out of the home without a mask. And because there are no masks, we might actually have to sew our own. Yeah, we really are panicked about the nationwide shortage of toilet paper. The dog is barking again, so we've put him outside, which just means he's barking louder. The kids are tantruming, and really it's hard to blame them because this is a lousy situation for everyone. And some days we are so frustrated and exhausted and stressed by how COVID-19 has turned everything upside down for us that we just want to scream. Can anybody else relate? So I can't hear you. Are you all muted?
I'm not muted.
Are they?
I'm muted.
Oh, muted. Okay. Okay. How do I get a chat in here too? Okay. So, okay. Oh, chat. Okay. So you should feel free as we go along to unmute and chime in. In fact, I am going to be asking you some questions. Do you know how to do that? To chime in?
Everyone can use, there's a chat icon right underneath the bell on the left-hand side. That's probably the easiest. Or Nancy, if you're okay with being interrupted, they can unmute. They can unmute and ask in real time.
Well, that's actually what I would prefer as we go along. Okay, we can advance to the next slide. So yes, it is true that we are living with a lot of heightened stress right now. And much as we would like to avoid all of these uncomfortable feelings we're experiencing, we really cannot run from them because resilience requires that we do the exact opposite. We've got to name the feelings, we've got to understand them, and we've got to accept them. Marcus Aurelius is a name I'm not sure any of you are familiar with, but he was one of the great leaders and Stoics of all time. And his wisdom is still shared today, and it's really just as timeless. He said that our actions may be impeded, but there can be no impeding our intentions or dispositions because we can accommodate and adapt. The mind adapts and converts to its own purposes the obstacle to our acting. So what he is really saying here is that even when things feel out of control and our actions are impeded as they are right now, we can still choose to act by learning to reframe the obstacles in our path. Okay, next slide. So this is what we're going to cover today. We're going to look at what resilience is and is not. We're going to, I'm going to introduce you to the resilience framework and show you the legal context for that framework, how and why it's relevant for you as attorneys. We are going to have an opportunity to learn, to answer and to learn to apply the 3 foundational questions of the framework. These are questions on your handout. Actually, Kimberly, were you able to email everyone the 2 handouts?
I'm afraid if I click off here to do that, I might lose something. So,
Because they're not going to be able to participate
all
really.
right, let me try that really fast. Let me.
I can handle it too. This is Miranda. I'll put it in the Teams meeting.
Can you do it on your end, Miranda?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, cool.
Thanks,
Can you see all the
everybody.
guests?
Thanks everybody for bearing with us, because this is new for all of us. And I've never used Microsoft Teams before. I'm usually a Zoom person.
All righty, let's go. Let me go back then. Okay. And let me.
So Miranda, tell me when you've done that.
Okay. Sorry, Nancy, it's taking a minute.
No, it's okay.
Okay, I'm gonna need a minute to figure out how to share this with everybody. If you want to just continue, Nancy, I think I might be able to just push it in the chat.
problem.
Okay.
Okay, so Kimberly, can you just advance the next slide? Okay, so I want you, in spite of some of the hiccups, which is to be expected, I really want you to get maximum value out of today's program. And in order to do that, I'd like to encourage you to do 4 things. Number 1, I want you to give yourselves permission to nurture your emotional intelligence. So, you know, you guys are not taught these skills in law school, and you probably don't have much of a chance to learn them on the job. Maybe because all of you, I believe, are solo practitioners or work in very small teams, you might have more ability to learn some of these skills than if you worked at a big firm with a lot of bureaucracy. But even so, these are skills that by and large are a little bit foreign for you. But in today's climate in particular, you really need a hefty dose of emotional intelligence to survive and thrive. So one of the most important tenets of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. And that's really the one that we're going to be addressing the most in the time that we have together today. So, but just so you know, these some really interesting statistics about EQ. That EQ, which is the acronym for emotional intelligence, is actually the biggest indicator of performance in the workplace, and it's the strongest driver of leadership and personal excellence. According to Talent Smart, 90% of top performers have high EQ, and on average, people with high EQ, they earn roughly $29,000 more annually than their low EQ counterparts. So please keep an open mind. It is absolutely necessary for growth, which is the entire point of resilience. I'd like to invite you to please make one comment, preferably live, once you get the worksheet that Miranda's going to send you, and to commit to at least one action item that you can take to boost your resilience, either for yourselves and also as it, of course, relates to your clients and your practice. Okay, next slide. So this is an opportunity for people to chime in, either the chat or preferably take yourself off the mic. I want to ask you what you think it means to be resilient. What word or words or phrases come to mind when you think of the word resilience? Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you. This is Miranda. I think it means, to me, it seems just kind of, It's kind of a form of perseverance, maybe. I know that's a synonym.
Anything else? Anybody else? I'm not sure if Jay, can you hear me, or Dan, Colhane, or Barb? What is the resilience mean to you?
I don't know whether it means the ability to bounce back or the ability to remain even keel. I guess it's the bouncing back.
Okay. Who else? Anybody else have any thoughts? We have perseverance, bouncing back, kind of maintaining an even keel. Anybody else have any thoughts about what it means?
Keep going even when you have a setback.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
Being able to adjust to uncertainty.
Great. Great, absolutely. Anybody else?
Letting stuff bounce off you.
Okay. Wonderful. Okay, next slide.
Everybody should have the handout at this point. Greg, can you let me know what your last name is, please?
Okay, so
No.
I don't see the slide though. Did you put the, okay, here it is. Okay, so the clinical, so just so we're on the same page, the clinical definition of the word resilience, according to the American Psychological Association, is the ability to bounce back from difficult experiences, okay? So next slide. And it really is true that that resilience can mean different things to different people. So all of the definitions that you just offered about perseverance and navigating uncertainty and staying even keeled, those are all right on. You know, because real resilience requires something a little bit deeper than just bouncing back. So it really goes beyond the clinical definition of the word. So when I'm doing these training programs live, I have this I ask people if they like vegetables and what kind of vegetables they like. So people might say, well, I like broccoli, or I like kale, or I like zucchini. Okay, so in the same way that, you know, eating vegetables is good for you, right? Everybody knows that you have to do more than just eat vegetables if you want to stay healthy. You've got to get enough sleep. You've got to manage your stress. So important these days, right? You've got to get enough exercise. You might even have to take medicine for a thyroid problem. I don't know. So in the same way, resilience is really a lot deeper and a lot more nuanced than just bouncing back, which is why all of those definitions are true to some degree. So resilient individuals have to find ways to transcend challenges and setbacks by integrating the lessons and the losses. Only by adapting to our circumstances, whatever they are we able to make proactive change. You know, disruptive events, no problem, because resilient individuals find ways to use them to their advantage. So what I want you to understand is that resilience is essentially about building a trusting, respectful, conscious relationship with oneself. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing today. Resilience is not about the external factors. Resilience is something that comes from within. Okay, next slide. So I hope this is going to work on your end. Kimberly, do you think you're going to be able to play this video? It's embedded in here, but I don't see it. No. Okay, go back. Okay, so oh, I'm sorry, guys. Okay, the technology isn't working. So this is a video. I'm going to just explain it to you. So I don't know if anybody ever saw the film Hurricane Carter. It is based on a true story that came out in 1999. And it's an incredible story about a middleweight boxing champion played by Denzel Washington. He plays the character Hurricane Carter. So Hurricane Carter was this boxing champ whose entire reputation and life was destroyed when he and a friend of his were wrongly accused of killing 3 people in a New Jersey bar. You know, this is an awful thing. He's sentenced to 3 life terms in prison, and he is just absolutely determined to prove his innocence. He writes an autobiography, and, you know, he despairs about his circumstances for years, but holding on to his integrity. And, you know, eventually, a Canadian group, a nonprofit organization, they read his memoirs, and they're convinced enough of his innocence that they decide to work for his freedom. So in this scene, and I will be happy to, we'll follow up with you with the link if you'd like to see it. It's only like 1 minute and 50 seconds. Hurricane Carter is visited by this 11-year-old boy named Lazarus, and they have an entire conversation about resilience. And, you know, what happens is that Hurricane Carter, AKA Denzel Washington, talks about how we have to learn, even in the walls of the prison that is confining him, we have to learn to transcend the challenges that hold us back. So my question to all of you really is then, what is holding you back right now? And I don't want you to answer that. I just want you to think of it. And I'm so sorry that you're not able to see the clip, because it really is powerful. The other thing that comes through in this clip is that in order to transcend these challenges that hold us, we have to cultivate strategies that allow us to do that. And so in this scene, you know, Denzel Washington, he's a writer. Writing is the thing that allows him to rise above his imprisonment. You know, writing is a strategy for me too, because that's an important piece of who I am. Maybe for you, it's exercise, or it's meditation, or it's talking to a trusted mentor, or it's being part of a mastermind group. Whatever strategies are important to you, you have to be able to use them, especially when times are tough. Why don't we go to the next slide? So again, resilience is about transcending challenges and learning to integrate the lessons and the losses. But this is what resilience is not, because there's a lot of myths about this concept. Resilience is not about doing anything extraordinary or grand. I promise you do not have to summit Mount Everest or run 12 marathons in a year in order to be resilient. It is not about eliminating difficulty or stress or pain. Resilience actually requires that you move through those things, okay? So resilience is also, it's not quite the same thing as endurance or perseverance. You need perseverance in order to be resilient, but your path might follow a non-linear trajectory, as we'll talk about in the course of the webinar. And also, resilience requires a sense of optimism that you don't necessarily need when you're just trying to persevere. So resilience is never, ever, ever about closing the door on one chapter without locking in the learning. That is so important. And it's also never about strong-arming solutions like the crazy woman in this image, right? Bouncing on the shark. It's really about integrating the lessons and the losses. So let's go to the next slide. Okay. So I want to tell you a little bit about how I came to understand resilience and to be so passionate about it. You know, none of this happened overnight, guys, and my journey here has been a long and layered process. And in some ways, you know, that process is unfolding because we're always changing. Next slide. My husband, Brett, died of a brain tumor in 2004 when I was 37 and our twins were just 2.5 years old. This is actually among the last family photos that we ever took. It was just a few weeks before he died, and it was at a hospice in New York City where we lived. This is my son, Casey, and my daughter, Rebecca. So as you might imagine, although I hope none of you have ever had to imagine it just like this, this was a terrible, terrible time in my life. Now, Brett had a long illness, And even though there were so many months and years where we thought he was going to be okay, because it turned out the kind of tumor he had, a good percentage of people live. So there was really no way to predict his prognosis. And for most of this 7-year stretch of illness until his death, he really had excellent quality of life. He was working for Time Warner in New York City, and he was working on the internet when it was still really in its nascent phase. He was working with trailblazers like Walter Isaacson. It was really very exciting. So we decided to start a family because we thought he was going to be okay. And in fact, he had a very, very long stretch of wellness, which we believed was cure. So we were excited to be able to move forward with our lives. And then no sooner did I get pregnant and have these babies than everything fell apart. Literally, on the exact day that I became a mother, we got a call from Brett's neuro-oncologist at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital letting us know that his cancer had returned, and it was everywhere. Now, can you imagine having to hold that kind of joy of being a new parent and that sheer terror of knowing for sure your spouse is going to die at the same time? It was surreal. It still is. Brett hung on for a few more years, but from that day forward, he declined steadily until at last his suffering and ours was over. It was both anguishing and merciful when he died in February 2004. So what I want you to know is that I felt when Brett died that my life was over, really, that I was never going to have a future, which was a little bit true because the future, of course, I dreamed of having with him had died. And it took time for me to integrate this enormous loss and for me to figure out what now, what next. You know, I felt very, very stuck in my grief for a good long time. And it was holding me back, my stuckness. So in time, I did realize, though, that this was no way to live for myself or for my 2.5-year-old children, and that I was going to have to make a bold change. So I was about to turn 40, and I don't know about you guys, but there's nothing, there's nothing like a 0 birthday to make you reflect hard on life. If not now, when? I wonder if any of you have ever heard that expression. Well, though, that's the question that came to me when I was debating about what to do. I thought, what am I waiting for? That's how I wound up moving to Colorado. Okay, next slide. So Rebecca and Casey were 5 years old when we left New York and headed west, and in 2006. Now, I chose Colorado because my college roommate, Julie, lives here. And every time Brett and I would visit her over the years, I just fell in love with the landscape. I feel so lucky to live here. And after everything that had happened, the trauma of his illness and death, I was exhausted. And, New York City is a pretty exciting place to be, but it can also be very exhausting. And all I felt after this lengthy trauma I had been through was exhausted. So I really gravitated toward the healing sunshine and the open skies of Colorado. Here I am having summited my first 14er, Mount Bierstedt. And boy, it is such an empowering feeling to look out onto the wide open world after you felt stuck for so many years. Next slide. Next, okay. So, and this is really the Clip Notes version because that's all we have time for. Oh, go back. Nope, you're going the other way. Go back. Okay, here we go. So about 8 months after I moved to Colorado, I was feeling very bold. Everything was a big adventure, right? I mean, here it was. I left my entire support network, my family, everybody, and I picked up and I moved across the country with only my 5-year-old twins. So I was stepping out in a lot of ways. And one February day, while the twins were in kindergarten, I had read an article in the paper about a handsome widower with 2 children, and he was being touted as one of Denver's most eligible singles. Well, he was a popular newscaster for the ABC morning show, but, I'm a single mother of 5-year-old twins. I really don't have a lot of time to watch television, so I had no idea who he was. Well, his wife had died of pancreatic cancer when their boys were 10 and 11. Their story had been very public. So, I was kind of intrigued reading about this Steve Saunders, and I decided to send him an email and a photo because I thought, who knows, maybe we could be friends. I sent him a really good photo and he did not email me back. But, a few weeks passed and then I got to thinking that maybe the email went to spam. So I resent the email and photo and this time copied his work address instead of steve@5280singles.com. And he responded right away, which was really pretty cool. It turned out he was really very shy, even though he was in the public eye. So amid all crazy odds, we wound up getting married and blending our families, and we're coming up on our 12th wedding anniversary this summer. So my twins are now 18. They are seniors in high school, which is a very daunting time under the best of circumstances, but you put COVID-19 into the mix and school being canceled and colleges, and we're really needing a lot of resilience in this house. So, and Steve's boys are now 27 and 28. So I feel so lucky to have met Steve, but the takeaway for you is that this would not have happened if I had not made a conscious decision to move my life forward after my husband died. I just kept stepping out in small and big ways, and that has made all the difference. Next slide. Boldness is a mindset and a choice. I promise you don't have to move across the country like I did to be bold. What matters is that you choose to move beyond disruption, disappointments, setbacks, and losses of all kinds and embrace change. You have to choose not to be defined by what has happened to you or by what has not happened for you. Next slide. So this is resilience, everyone. It is no more complicated than that, because resilience really is a mindset and it's an intentional choice. Nobody is born resilient, right? These are learned skills that have to be practiced. More importantly, everybody can learn these skills. You don't have to be an extrovert. You don't have to be a fabulous public speaker. You don't have to be exceptionally, I don't know. I mean, you can be super introverted. There's no right or wrong, right? I mean, the more intentional you are about using some of the skills I'm going to teach you today, the more resilient and empowered that you're going to feel. Next slide. So this brings us to the heart of the resilience framework, which is really this is really the meat of what we're going to be working on today. So I want you to think of this framework as your house of resilience, the foundation that you can build upon every day, regardless of the stress and the challenges that you're facing. So here I read a quote by Marcus Aurelius, one of the great Stoics. So this is kind of interesting because the Stoics and these ancient philosophers, they saw themselves as mental athletes. Everything they did supported this idea of mental toughness so that they could be prepared for the challenges to come. So I would like for each of you to think of your house of resilience as your inner citadel, right? That no external force, not COVID-19, no other external force can knock down. And the more you learn to fortify your house of resilience through daily discipline, the better prepared you're going to be to cope with challenges and setbacks along the way. So just like when you build a house, which I've never done, but I kind of like to do it someday, I'd like to try it. You start with the foundation, right? You lay the foundation. It's the same thing here. So we're going to begin with these three foundational questions. Where do I feel challenged? How can I reframe the possibilities? And how can I expand my path of opportunity? I'm going to teach you just how to apply these questions to your business and your lives. Now, above the foundational layers, we have four pillars of support, right? Every house has supporting beams. And in the house of resilience, these are the 4 supporting beams: self-awareness, empathy, reasoned decision-making, and growth and change. Next slide. Okay, so with the time we have today, we don't have time to go through these pillars in depth, but I wanted you to see the framework in entirety and to see just how it can support you as attorneys. I would be very happy to send you a copy of this slide later if you would like. So you just email me or email Kimberly or Miranda and just let us know. So as I said, this is a sequential framework, right? Each question builds on the next. It's the same thing for the pillars. So when we do the pillars, we start with self-awareness, because this is absolutely crucial to building, this is absolutely crucial to build our confidence, right? We've got to figure out what strengths do we own and what challenges are getting in the way. So then when we do this work, we look at empathy, which is so important in the legal field, right? What does it really mean to see yourself in someone else's shoes? How can you be more empathic so that you can improve your relationships with your clients, right? Next is reasoned decision making. We have to learn how to look at the entire picture with a sense of detachment. We can't get so hung up on outcomes, because we have to learn to be a little more flexible in our thinking. We have to embrace the gray, as I'll talk about in a few minutes. And the final pillar of the resilience framework is about growth and change. It's all about adopting a growth mindset so that we can better manage our everyday stress and position ourselves to proactively seek all kinds of opportunities. Next slide. So again, this is our house of resilience, and I'm taking you back to the portion that we're going to be working on today. Actually, you should see a yellow, Kimberly, I'm sorry, go to the next slide. No, okay, go back. Okay. So does everybody have the worksheet printed out? Miranda, were you able to send that?
Yeah, I don't know if they have it printed, but they received it by email.
Okay. Can you guys just respond? Jay, Dan, anybody, just let me know, Barb, that you've received it, you can open it. Anybody?
We
Yeah.
received.
I've got it open. Yep.
We
Okay,
received 2. Is there a difference between the 2?
yeah. Well,
Else?
just, one is one is just about me and one is about the worksheet, but I want you just to pull up the worksheet. I mean, ideally you could print it out, but I'm sorry, we just had some technical snafus. So that worksheet really is intended to help you move through. I want you to get the most out of the webinar today. Okay, so if everybody is with me and if you can pull up the worksheet, great. If not, just listen in and you can do it later. It's no problem at all. So again, we're going to start with question number 1 right here in our framework. Where do I feel challenged? Now, I sometimes use the word stuck. I sometimes use the word frustrated. You can use whatever word you like, whether it's where do I feel stuck, where do I feel challenged, where do I feel frustrated. Doesn't matter, whichever word resonates with you. The point is I want you to think of, I want you to think of something that really, that you feel reaches you on a deep level. And I want you right now to excuse me, I'm sorry. I want you right now to just to be thinking about what it is that's making you feel challenged. Okay, next slide. So there is a definite, cost to not addressing our challenges. We stay stuck. And again, that is the word more than challenge that I relate to, but challenges feels a little softer for people. And I know as attorneys, you're high achieving people. And so the word stuck may be difficult for you. But, I don't know if anybody can you relate to this, but I sure can, because there's a lot of things that can happen when we stay stuck. It's very difficult, right, to solve problems, to complete tasks. The smallest of tasks take on monumental proportion. When we feel stuck, we don't communicate as often or as well, and therefore our relationships are diminished. That's really something to take stock of right now, because everybody is under so much stress, and you might think you're communicating as effectively as you want to be with your clients, but I would encourage you to really think about what you can do to open up those conversations more. When we feel stuck, we often feel an uptick of anger, frustration, sadness, hopelessness, and these are the exact feelings that can lead to fight or flight symptoms, which keep us all the more stressed. It's so unhealthy for our bodies. And finally, when we're stuck and we're challenged, we feel paralyzed and everything seems boring and repetitive. Like there's no sense of optimism. Okay, next slide. So in the worksheet you have, or just out loud if you'd like to, I want to encourage you to think of something that is making you feel hard or especially hard right now. I don't want you to write COVID-19 because that's a given. But, let me give you an example. I mean, is it that you're struggling with the technology, right? Is that feeling really hard to you right now? Is that feeling like it's getting in your way somehow? Or it's difficult for you to concentrate because you're working at home and you're not used to it and there's so many distractions, or you're just losing your focus. So if we could just take a few seconds to think of a couple of challenges. It can just be one if you want, but for the purpose of the webinar, what we're going to do is we're going to use that challenge and filter everything else through that challenge. So pick something that you think you'd like to work on. And I don't know if a couple of you can just chime in and let me know when you have something. So Dan, you're not muted. Thank you. Is there something that?
Yeah, I would say feeling distracted and having a difficulty in focusing and getting stuff done timely.
Yeah.
I have the same issue. That's the same issue that I have. This is Jay.
Right. I'm sure that's everybody's feeling that.
This is Brad. I've got some discovery that I've been sort of having writer's block on, but it's a recurring thing because I hate discovery. And I always put it last.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. So I wonder then if each of you have a challenge, right? Or one or two or three, I'd like you to think about how, your perspective might be being negatively altered by this challenge. Perspective, guys, is all powerful, right? So what are you not seeing because you're choosing to dwell in your distraction or your lack of focus or the ability to sort of get things done? Are you missing out on anything? I'm going to give you an example. In my case, I mentioned that I was very, very, very stuck in my widowhood for a long time. And it was the first thing I said about myself in any new situation, even long after I'd met Steve. I put widowhood above being a mother, a writer, a communications executive, a recent transplant from New York, etc. So I got a little stuck in my story. I love this quote from Ryan Holiday. I think he's excellent, by the way. His books are terrific, and this is my favorite one, The Obstacle is the Way. He says, there is no good or bad without us. There is only perception. There is the event itself and the story we tell ourselves about what it means. So I wonder if, just take another minute and think about whether or not your perspective is being negatively altered because you're telling yourself stories that you're not able to concentrate. For instance, you're not able to get things done. Okay,
Nancy,
sorry.
it's Miranda. It's
Yeah.
Miranda, and I thought I might just be able to chime in on that item that Dan shared. So I don't know if you all have read the book. Sorry.
That's okay.
If you've read the book, Eat the Frog, but that is probably one of the biggest drivers of lawyer productivity that I've found. And basically, it's a lot of lawyers do exactly what they're describing, is just kind of self-sabotage their time and their energy by procrastinating, and then you feel pressure because you've procrastinated. And the Eat the Frog book is really helpful. It's basically, if eating the frog is the grossest, worst thing you have to do all day, do it first.
Right, exactly.
And that's the one book that I've found when it comes to kind of kickstarting that productivity from a business perspective.
Right. Well, that's a good strategy, actually. Do it first. And we're going to talk more about that in question 3. Let's go to the next slide, Kimberly.
There we go.
Okay.
It's stuck.
Oh, it's stuck? No.
There we go.
Okay, so this brings us to question number 2, right? How can I reframe the possibilities? So, this is the question that I ask myself, really, guys, when deciding to move to Denver. What did I have to lose? I mean, in order to make this huge decision to move across the country, et cetera, I had to recognize that, the gray of my life and my life itself could still be bold, and that bold actually exists in this space of gray and not in the black and white. Because remember, real resilience is about more than just bouncing back. It's about learning to integrate the lessons and the losses, and being in this nuanced, flexible space of gray is how we learn to do just that. So this concept might make some of you a little, squeamish, because you're very highly analytical folks, I know. But if you really want to become resilient, you got to learn to see from a more nuanced, flexible perspective. Okay, next slide. So what does it mean, to be in the gray? Well, before we unpack this, let's talk a few minutes about black and white. Black and white look great on these dice. They look great on zebras, on Dalmatians, on piano keys. I have a lot of black and white clothing I love. But black and white thinking just blocks success, because black and white thinking is rigid and flexible thinking. Black and white thinking causes all kinds of missed opportunities. It blocks creativity and innovation. It strains our relationships. It triggers fear and self-doubt. And what's more, black and white thinking closes us off to constructive feedback, which is a sure recipe for staying stuck. Because how do we really grow if we close ourselves off to open and honest communication? This is what builds resilience. When we learn to invite feedback and discourse from others, we put ourselves on the path of growth. So when we are feeling stressed, and when, the way many of us are right now, we tend to think in a very black and white linear manner. And even though it feels like it gives us the illusion of control, it's really not positioning us ultimately to become resilient. Next slide. So what I want to propose is an entirely new paradigm, gray, but not 50 shades, okay? So, I love grayscales. And you can just see, just from this simple slide here, there are a lot of nuances and rich tones. You know, there's really like a whole world of possibility if you choose to see it living inside this grayscale. You see, gray is the place where things are neither absolutely horrendous, like the worst ever, or perfect, but just somewhere in between. And isn't it so true, right, that the more experiences we accrue, both personally and professionally, the more we recognize there's a lot of gray. Gray is where we get to value life's uncertainties and to define our boldest, truest selves, especially the obstacles that have been put in our path. So, you know, Jim Collins, many of you are probably familiar with his work. He's a management consultant. He's authored many books, including Good to Great and Built to Last. He calls this concept of being in the gray the genius of the ant, because builders of greatness, you have to reject the tyranny of the or, you know, that's black and white, and you have to embrace the genius of the ant, which is gray. And when you do, you will feel totally transformed, because you will no longer feel as though you are boxed in and stuck by whatever challenge or challenges are holding you back. Next slide. So again, we have an opportunity to chime in or to use the worksheet as you like. Oops, that didn't line up right on this deck. Oh, no, go back. Yeah, okay. So thinking about this a little bit more, what fears or concerns might you have about addressing this challenge, and what would happen if you don't address it? Similarly, I'd like you to think about right now, you know, the long-term value and benefits that could come from addressing this challenge. Because when we learn to reframe the possibilities, we get to reimagine different outcomes for ourselves. So I am going to reimagine that I am a technology czar, right? And that all these little blips and things that get in my way, I'm going to be able to move through them. And so I know that for me, if I didn't address some of the challenges that are coming with really having to work virtually exclusively, I'm going to sabotage my business and my growth. So, and that's going to help me in the long term. So anybody else willing to share about how you might reframe a challenge? Does anybody have any questions on that? Okay, let's move on.
I have a question.
Oh, sure. Go back.
So I think this is Brad. So my impediment that I just explained was I said I hate something. I hate discovery. How do I change I hate or I strongly dislike into something? How do I change that in my mind?
Oh, I think that's a great question. So, you know, hate is a black and white word, right? So that is such a strong word. So I would encourage you to just use a softer word. You know, it's not my favorite thing to do, but I'm going to do it. It's a little bit like Miranda's example. Eat the frog book. I know I have to do it. I'm going to get it out of the way first, right? I think you just, you know, resilience is about, you know, it's about pushing through what's hard and what you don't like, because you know it's going to help you. It's going to help you transcend and move to a better place. So I think, you know, Brad, if you're able to have the outcome in mind, so to speak, of where you want to be, right, and to let that guide you, you won't use the word hate, because you'll know that you need to do this in order to reach your goal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, let's move on then. Okay, so this, we're now in the final foundational question of the resilience framework. So again, just to recap, we identified what's keeping us challenged or stuck. We've learned that we can reframe those challenges, and we know that we can, and we now are at the point where we have to put ourselves on the path of growth by expanding our path of opportunity. So next slide. These questions are also on your worksheet. So 3 sort of probing questions I'd like us to dive into now are, I want you to be thinking about what small step you could take right now to move through this challenge. You know, is there a YouTube video you can watch to help you? Is there a book you can pick up? You know, Brad, maybe you might want to, you know, look at a thesaurus and, you know, look at some words that are the antonym of hate and think about words that you can use that resonate with you somehow that might help you feel differently about the discovery process. You know, really important, I want you to think about who in your support network you could turn to for help. Who are the people who embolden you? And this is important. I mean, who are the people who you need to stay away from because maybe they drain you of your reserves right now? And what resources aren't you using right now that might help you to address this challenge? So I would love any thoughts you have on this, or if you just want to take a couple minutes to write them down, but to the degree that you can really answer these questions honestly, they're going to help you move forward. Does everybody feel like you're availing yourselves of all of the resources that you need to be successful?
I think that's a real challenge.
Tell me more, Dan.
Well, I feel like at times I just don't even think in that way of like what are additional resources out there, and I'm kind of mired in being stuck instead of thinking about solutions.
Okay, so do you think, like, what are some resources you think that might be able to help you that maybe you haven't tapped in?
Yeah, my usual ones are like my network of other lawyers and colleagues. So maybe that's an idea, but like I don't know. You said earlier what books, what YouTubes. I mean, I never think about that stuff. So that's a really good idea for me.
Mm-hmm. You know, there's so many great TED Talks also out there that can be inspirational. And sometimes all we need is just to shift our mindsets, right? Because we have to take ourselves out of our heads, because when we're stuck, we're in our heads, right? And we have to sort of be open to absorb what somebody else is saying. Sometimes, you know, inspiration can even come in the form of a song or music, when we just have to pry ourselves open to different kinds of things.
So this is Barb, and I have a question.
Sure.
Like I can think of, a half a dozen people I could turn to for support, but they're all in the same position I'm in.
Right.
Solo practitioner, got other things going on in my life, and I hesitate reaching out because they're busy too. And I don't know that there's anything that could solve that.
Well, you know, I bet they're feeling very similarly to you, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I mean, are you feeling isolated right now? Are you feeling overwhelmed?
Overwhelmed.
Yeah. Do you think it's fair to say that they might be feeling overwhelmed too?
Yeah, and that's why I hesitate to reach out.
But you know what? Maybe, I mean, here's the thought. I mean, setting up a Zoom call, right, or a FaceTime call, and just having a virtual happy hour or virtual coffee and just kind of acknowledging where everybody is at. So this is where empathy comes into play, which we really don't have time in today's program to delve into, but it is it's a really important pillar of resilience. But you know, I think that would be a wonderful thing for you and for your colleagues also, is to just reach out and to share, you know, I'm feeling this way, and I imagine you might be too, and I'm wondering, you know, would you like to have a 20-minute coffee break, and we can just kind of see where we're doing, see what we're doing. And, you know, maybe one of the resources that would be very helpful is to think about ways that you can take care of yourselves right now, right? Because we're not able to go to the gym, right? We're not able to go to the movies. We're not able to go out to restaurants. We're not able to go to comedy clubs. The world is changing. So what are the other resources or things that you could do to help you feel more emboldened and empowered? Anybody else have any thoughts or ideas?
I think, this is Jay. I
Hi,
think that this is a time when people are really anxious to try to help others.
Yes.
I'm finding that reaching out and asking questions, whether they're legal questions, personal questions, people are feeling like if they can help somebody in their quarantine state, they are going to appreciate that request, honestly. So I would just encourage people to feel free to reach out to those people in their network or even outside of their network, because I think, one, it's a distraction from their situation, and two, this is a time where I think people are really wanting to help each other, more so than any time earlier. So I would encourage you to overcome that concern and actually try it. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
I agree wholeheartedly. Anybody else? Just to piggyback on what Jay was saying also, I mean, I think this is a time where, you know, we see some of the worst of humanity and we see some of the best of humanity, right? You're people of tremendous integrity. And I think it would go a long way also to acknowledge that everybody is feeling stress and to reach out to your clients even, and just to have some conversation. I mean, it's like the elephant in the room. You can't not acknowledge it. And then if you acknowledge where you're at and everybody's overwhelmed and struggle, then you're more likely to build from there. Okay, let's go forward. Want to be, okay. So I'm going to actually skip this because I want to just go to the next part right now, just in the interest of time. So just really quick, you know, I don't know if anybody has ever heard of Mel Robbins. She is a speaker and an author, and she's written a lot of books and she's given a lot of TED Talks. She's very famous. And she came up with this ingenious idea called the 5-second rule that I use all the time. And because so many of us are having trouble jump-starting our day and getting things done, I thought it would be really prudent to share it with you. So basically, the way it works is you count backwards from 5. I know it sounds ridiculous, but when you count backwards, it interrupts the neural pathways, right? It shifts things up in our brain. In the same way that I was suggesting to Dan, you know, go watch a YouTube, right? Or go listen to some music, because it's like when we get out of our own heads, it shifts our neural pathways. So she really kind of serendipitously discovered this 5-second rule by accident when she was at a very hard time in her life, and she couldn't get up out of bed. She couldn't get the kids to school on time. And one day she was lying in her pajamas in the middle of the afternoon, and she saw a rocket launch on NASA. And you know how they go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off. Well, it just made an impact. And the next morning, when she was struggling to get out of bed, she said aloud to herself, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off. And she launched her body out of bed like a rocket. And that began to lead to a lot of change. So I do this a lot at different times of the day. And it's such an easy thing that I hope that you will just use it and incorporate it in your own lives. The next time you're struggling to get something done, it really does work. And you can easily Google Mel Robbins' 5-second rule. So we're running late on time. We had some technical problems, of course, so we got started late. So just go to the next slide, Kimberly, if you would. I would like you to try to, ooh, wow, this really got all turned around here. Sorry, guys. I don't know, I see that our PowerPoint systems are different. Mine looks clean, but I think we have different systems. Anyway, I would like you to try to think about at least one action step that you might be willing to take to put yourself on the path of resilience. It really makes a difference. It's one thing just to talk about it, it's another to do. So are there any, I don't have to be anywhere. I don't have any meetings to run off to right now. And I would be happy to stay. For those who have to jump, feel free, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have or any thoughts.
Nancy, thanks so much. This was really helpful. I unfortunately have to drop off, but I really appreciate it and found this really valuable.
Thank you so much. Anybody else have any questions or thoughts?
Great job, Nancy. This is Miranda.
Okay. Thanks, Miranda. Thanks for facilitating it. Thank you, guys. Please feel free to email me or to call with any questions. I'm happy to send a slide or any links if you'd like. And thanks so much for bearing with us. And thank you, Kimberly. You were great. I'm sorry you had to do this. I'm sorry we couldn't figure it out.
My pleasure. You did great.
But we're resilient. So, right, we adapt and we're flexible. We can't be black and white. This is very gray. Very gray world we're living in right now. Just like my hair.
You have a good rest of the day. Thank you.
You guys too. Thank you, everybody.
So, Nancy?
Yes. Hi, Barb.
I was wondering if there's a way that I don't have the whole screen. I can't see you. There we go. Do something similar for Wolf.
I'd be happy to.
I'm thinking maybe in 2 weeks or so, because I'm not sure what other people are feeling, but I'm getting to the point where I'm kind of saturated with responses to COVID-19.
Oh, yeah.
And in our coffee break this morning, one of our attorneys, who actually, she founded Wolf way back when, and let go of her solo practice, and now she's coming back and trying to redevelop it in a world where everything's virtual right now. And so I think for her and maybe other members, this would be a really good topic to do maybe in like 2 weeks when the barrage of webinars has calmed down some.
It's like I had 4 webinars I was invited to today. It's too much.
Yeah. And I think I would even present this in a different way too. More of a part of a practice management series.
Yeah. I like that. Well, right. And this was very tricky. And, we spent an hour and a half on the phone this morning with Kimberly trying to figure out how to do this. It's so hard when you have someone else controlling your slides and stuff.
Well, you did great. You did great.
Thank you. I usually do this. I do this live a lot, and I do trainings. I do half day and full day trainings. So actually, I'm going to send you an email about some links I have, because I love to work in particular with women attorneys. That's sort of a sweet spot. And it's interesting, Barb, is that I work with a lot of different groups. I work with a lot of financial advisors and insurance advisors and people in higher ed and professional women's groups and healthcare, but lawyers found me. I didn't seek out attorneys, they found me, and it was women attorneys who found me. So I work a lot with the Dallas Bar Association. I don't know why, Texas, but I don't know, Texas loves me. It's interesting. This is the 3rd year. And they found me because they said, we are having such a problem with women attorneys leaving the profession. Our attorneys are so stuck and so stressed and so burned out, and they're leaving before they really have reached the gains. And so they have something similar. They have a whole leadership development series. And so I come every year and I do this and it's really great. It's their favorite part of the series because it's the only time they ever really get to focus on themselves in this way. And you're just not given those opportunities to do that and to use your brains in this way and to really foster your EQ. It's so important. So I actually like working with them so much. I developed an online course called Resilient Leadership for Women Attorneys, and I'm going to send it to you. And actually, in the menu of services, I was offering a discount for, well, you'll see for anybody who participated today who wanted it, but it's a whole series. And I mean, I was asked to do it because people liked it so much and they wanted the tools. So I want to share that with you. I have your email, so I'm going to email you.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Because the big hurdle that I have and where I feel overwhelmed is the sheer foolishness or I don't know what word to say, that I could take this group and take it to the next level. And it has happened, but I continually have this weight that comes down. It's like, okay, you're just fooling yourself. This is not going to happen. That's not going to happen.
Hey, Barb, hold on 1 second because my dog is barking and nobody in my house is responding. And I think I don't want him to pee. Can you hold on half a second?
Yeah.
Okay. What is it? Hey, guys, can you let the dog out? I'm barking. I'm on a call. Sorry. I'm listening.
So I'm continually surprised about how people are so receptive to the idea of Wolf being a bigger organization. And I think the reason why this change has been successful is really trying to find a home for women attorneys where they feel like people have got their back, that they can turn to each other, that we do have social events and
mentorship.
Right.
There's so few, right? I mean, there's a lack of mentors because there's not a lot of senior women in the senior most levels.
So what is blocking growth, as far as from my perspective now, is the fact that I think we need to go to the next level and get a website that would allow much more resource access for people. For example, last week, I put up the question, who does contract work? And so if you do contract work, please put your name, your email address, phone number, and the areas that you do it. And I had 12 to 14 attorneys reply. And I said, okay, I'm going to put a list together. But putting a file on Facebook is a lot harder for people to find. So it's those types of things. It's creating a infrastructure.
Right.
But I have no one to turn to say, okay, what should I do next? Does this sound like a good idea? That type of thing. So I guess for me, my hurdles are just,
how do you build the infrastructure?
yeah.
But you start by figuring out with some of the questions I just asked, who can you turn to help you build the infrastructure, right? you're a very, I don't know you, but you have to be a highly accomplished person, right? And so you could even brainstorm with a couple of people who, okay, I need a web designer. So let me tell you a fabulous resource too, because Wolf, I don't know what your resources are. I'll send it to you. I'll send you an email. But
Okay.
there's something called Fiverr. Like you could
Okay.
have somebody do a whole website for dirt cheap.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'll send you the link. I'm going to send you a
Okay.
few things. But it's a fiverr.com. VERR.
Okay.
You should
And
have
it's
a website.
funny because just seeing who came on today, one of them is Dan Culhane.
Yeah.
And I don't know how familiar you are with Dan.
We're friendly, but I don't know him professionally.
So Dan's an attorney.
Yeah.
And he's done litigation, and he kind of happened upon creating
The
a
Discovery
software.
Genie. I know all about it. Yeah.
So it just occurred to me on this program that I should reach out to Dan and say, okay, when you're one person who
Yeah.
has one idea, what sources do you tap? You know, who do you get for your input, your feedback, your sounding?
He's
Because
so well connected. Absolutely. You should.
because I
You
don't
know,
want to reinvent the wheel. Because
right.
I know that there have to be supports in place.
I would definitely reach out to him before you do anything. And then you'll just start making a list and combing it. You know, we started late because we were all wacky with the technology. But one of the things I also like to do is an accountability match, you know, so I have people commit to a step, right? And then you pick partners. And when I do this live in person, it's like we do a paper toss, which people love. It gets them moving out of their chairs. You pick up somebody's name on the paper toss, and then you know, you are that person's accountability partner. So you check in with one another in a week's time to see what progress you've made. So we didn't get to do that. And I don't know how to replicate that virtually, quite frankly.
Oh, I do. I've got an idea right now.
But
We should do that because at the Solo and Small Firm Institute, there was there's some company that is a coaching company, and they mention accountability too, and it just lit everybody's eyes up, you know, to have someone else that you're accountable with. If we have people sign up, I can get you a list of everyone who's attending, and you just take a pen or, you know, pin and say, okay, going for Barb, who's going to be her partner? And then you just announce it virtually. And
you ask people to jump in, or
you let people know that this is going to be a goal set / accountability session.
Yeah.
That would discuss what the concept is, the types of goals, how to make sure you're not setting something that's too big.
Right.
And the ending with, okay, now we're going to choose accountability partners at random. This is your accountability partner. Call each other in a week. And then maybe we have a follow-up session the next week where people talk about what the hurdles were to get it done. Or, you know, once you've done that, what's the next step to keep proceeding?
Yeah. I actually, let me think more about that too, but that's a good idea of just assigning it, or let me think more about how to do it. But yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to talk to you. I'd be happy to do a session for you. I would love it. And you know, it's funny that you said that. I was trying to Google Wolf, and there's no website.
There's
So
no website. We
you
took it
need
down.
it. You
We
need
took
it.
it down
Yeah.
because what was there had about 30 of our 230 attorneys on it.
Wow.
And so, and there's nobody maintaining it. There's nobody adding attorneys or taking them off. And so I thought, you know, until we can have a platform that's fully inclusive, you know, it's ready for people to use, we should just take it down.
Yeah.
So our only online presence is the Facebook page.
Right. Okay. Well, that's fine. Well, why don't you, yeah, I mean, I'm happy to do a program. We can build in an accountability section for sure. I'll tell you what, though, I don't want to use Microsoft Teams. I don't
Okay.
want to do this again because I really didn't like it. And I think if I'm going to be the presenter, I've got to have a little more control over what I'm doing. I'm going to use Zoom.
Okay.
So
I also tried Teams with one of our roundtables.
I was
It
on that
did
webinar.
not work well.
I was on that
And
webinar.
yes, you were.
I sat
And
on.
I thought
wanted to
at the time,
see if I did it.
I thought at the time, you know, okay, it's just a learning curve. But
No,
I don't know. I think
don't like it.
Teams might be very powerful for people who are working together,
Yeah,
but not as a presentation
I don't
platform.
think so. And I think more people I know use Zoom than Teams.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody I know uses Teams. So I will do it, but I don't want to use this platform. So,
Yeah, I just purchased so that we could have this coffee this morning. I just purchased the expanded Zoom pack.
I had to do it too. Which one did you get?
I just got the next level up.
I did too, but I'm going to have to get the webinar one. But it's worth it because I don't want to do this. So why don't you get back to me with the date? I'll email you a few resources I have.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank
I'm
you.
so glad
Thank you
that
so much for doing this.
Oh, no, it was my pleasure. And so I hope it was well received. It was really hard to get, I don't know, it was just really hard to get feedback, you know.
Yeah.
It seems so.
Well, and I think part of the hurdle for getting feedback from people is this is so new for us.
Oh,
and
yeah.
whatever has been done in the past hasn't really been interactive. It's been like,
No.
okay, turn on your computer and watch somebody say something rather than an integration. And I think that has to be built into the description, that is an interactive session.
Yes.
Where people will be asked to give their input.
Absolutely. Without a doubt. Right. And that's why I said that at the beginning, but I also didn't realize they hadn't gotten the hand sheets. So anyway, it's all good.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you
good to
so
talk to you.
much.
I will email you. Actually, give me your email again, just while I have you on the phone.
Okay, it's Barb Heikoff, BarbHeikoff as in Frank, at heikofflaw.com. No dots anywhere. And I'm thinking maybe the title of it is something like past the hurricane or something. Time to get our heads back on straight.
Yeah, whatever you know, right? Yeah, that's no problem.
Well, thank you.
All right, it's my pleasure. I'll email you and we'll go from there.
Okay, thanks.
Okay,
All right.
bye. Take good
Bye.
care.
You too.